Well, it's great to be back at Emerge. This is actually my second time moderating here, one of my favorite conferences in Miami. Responsible AI and technology is really a hotbed of discussions and debate, and really, I would love for us to kind of have more of a multidisciplinary philosophical discussion for a lot of the AI practitioners, founders, VCs in the room today. I know we've been, talking a lot about what are the ethical responsibilities of AI founders as well as executives. Let's dive into kind of like as organizations scale and grow bigger, like at Akamai and Delta, how are you each, KK, as well as Robert, thinking about introducing new technology and breeding a culture of experimentation while also creating the safeguards as well as, checks and balances for security? KK, do you want to start at Delta?
Sure, and thank you for having this panel, first of all, and appreciate it very much. Now, Delta, as you know, is, we enjoy being one of the most innovative airlines. Definitely in the airline sector, we like to think we're tops. And what you would have seen is AI is not, new to us. I mean, we've used various forms of AI over the years. Initially when it came down to even optimization of our network, of our routes, all of that, that's AI. And then you get into more aspects of what is called as, machine learning, deep learning. You've obviously enjoyed the aspect of natural language processing when even talking to folks on the phone, or, you've been through cameras and, all of that, and recognition. All of that has been there in our DNA all along. Yeah. Now, Gen AI, of course, is a relatively newcomer to the industry, and so obviously it's changed and made it more consumerized, if you will. So now the whole notion of how you introduce new technology is not new to us also. In terms of, we got to obviously, any technology we bring in, and we are an airline, so safety is number one. So you know that, and for our customers, our employees, so that's really number one for all of us. And then closely behind are our objectives of, hey, we want to have what we call a welcoming, caring, and elevated experience for our customers. And in addition, we want to run our airline properly, right? Operational excellence, leave on time, land on time, no misplaced bags, that kind of stuff. So all of that is, built on the basis of technology. And so we have to constantly keep innovating with different kinds of technologies all along. AI is sort of not only the new kid on the block, but we have processes and mechanisms for governance, compliance, all along, whether you call it guardrails from an architecture perspective, guardrails from an info security perspective, yep, and all of that. So I think that's continued, and we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, as to how you ensure that these processes are actually robust and built in so that you don't, go off the plantation, if you will. Yeah.
Totally. And Robert, at Akamai, how are you guys thinking about guardrails, not just from a technological perspective, but also so much of what you guys build are in the cloud, architecture, on-prem types of environments? What are the human checks and balances you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to speak about this. AI is a topic I love talking about. I love AI. In fact, I'm wearing these are my Day of AI socks. Nice. I actually have Day of AI socks. But the point that you're making about responsible use, governance, I think is very important, because AI is never going to live up to its potential if we don't pay attention to using it responsibly and ethically and with the right governance structures. And at Akamai, we've been using AI for a long time, but generally in very sort of specific areas of the business. But a couple of years ago, with the dawn of generative AI, the aperture really opened wide up, where you get to the point now where you'd probably be more challenged to think of an area that can't benefit from AI than to think of, where do you use AI, right? It's kind of the other way around now. You can probably use AI in almost any area and get benefit from it. And when you get to that point, well, that means that the entire company needs to be encouraged to try it, encouraged to use it, but do it in a responsible way. So we started with a literacy campaign, actually. We created an internal website that we call Akamai AI. It turns out you can't spell Akamai without AI. Who knew? So we put up this internal website, and we started really with a campaign of AI literacy, which, by the way, is what Day of AI is also all about. And created tutorials, created a whole bunch of learning materials, as well as sandboxes. So internal sandboxes that allowed people to experiment with AI without potentially causing harm. So it was really about creating a safe internal space where people could not only learn about AI, but experiment with it and do it without fear.
And we've talked a lot about like creating a culture of experimentation. Would love to kind of double click into what are the types of sandbox environments each of you are building in-house so that the employees, the partners can play with these newer tools without, say, pushing it to prod and taking down thousands of Delta, flights.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we absolutely have sandboxes to allow different use cases to actually go ahead and start to experiment. But what we also have is a robust intake process, right? So we obviously love folks going out and experimenting, but we want to have some boundaries, guardrails around what are you actually doing? Is there a business purpose to it? Do you just want to kick the tires on it and all of that? But what we do is bring it through a process, which now the interesting thing is with AI being so powerful, we now start to, in addition to the regular governance processes, we definitely have people from IT, right? People from the business, right. People from the other, categories like legal, compliance, risk, audit, and others who are also sitting in on the intake process and saying that, okay, this is a good use case to go after and not have those ethical considerations, those kinds of things. And then it gets into the process where then it's more provisioning of environments that we have. We are now in the cloud, so we say, okay, these cloud environments are enabled with AI, sort of infrastructure that we've standardized. And then you can go on and leverage all of the, tools and, let's say, toys that are there to do what is there. And the important thing is that AI has, in the new version of AI with the Gen AI, has now, as Bobby said, has expanded this whole notion of what can be done, the art of the possible. So we want to have them do the art of the possible piece, but also make sure that it's actually not leading us into unsafe situations,
right.
Both from an info security perspective, because we have built a robust, set of mechanisms for doing what you would call DevSecOps, which is like the process by which all this tools are built together. The notion of secure coding standards based on training. Mm-hmm. We have a notion of vulnerability scanning, all of that. Yep. But also we provide, much like Bobby said, the training that's needed. So we have a notion of, hey, based on a persona, what kinds of things would you normally be doing? So we have a notion of align the persona to the kinds of things you would want to do, and so the training we do there. We also say activate that whole training series, and then we say operationalize and sustain, because there are different stages, and we usually say that it's a 10, 20, 70 deal, right? So 10 is, okay, classroom training, and you can go to training. The 20 is actually shoulder surfing, seeing what others do and all that. Yep. The 70 is really on the job and what you do, play in these environments and all that. But all the while you're with the notion that you're actually secure and safe.
Yeah. So I love kind of this design thinking framework that you're introducing into Delta's workforce. So like start with why, understanding the pain points and thinking about is the AI tool the right approach to solving whatever business problem. Would love to get your thoughts, Robert, on, you had mentioned creating a culture where there isn't shadow AI. Can we talk more about that? Because there's oftentimes a tension between constraints breed creativity, but also too much constraints or risk aversion can create these types of shadow AI problems. Yeah. Can we dive deeper into that topic?
Yeah, I actually think of shadow AI very similar to the way I've thought about shadow IT, which is a fairly broad term, but a lot of it came about due to sort of the early days of cloud, where a lot of some companies were afraid of cloud, right? Because it's a new thing, and I'm going back a decade plus, but you've got maybe a CISO or a CIO who is wary of cloud because you lose control, right? It's not your infrastructure, it's somebody else's infrastructure. Is it secure enough? Is it reliable enough? Can I store my private data there? So you end up in a situation, or many companies did end up in a situation 10 plus years ago of, well, you can't use cloud. And as soon as you say that, you got a big problem, because that means you're going to have shadow IT, because it's too damn good. I mean, the cloud is so easy to use. It's so easy to stand up your own apps in the cloud that if you try and put up barriers, you're just going to end up with shadow IT. And I think some companies are at risk of a very similar thing now with shadow AI, because you've heard the horror stories, and a natural reaction in some companies is going to be, oh, you can't use AI, you can't use GPT, you can't use this, you can't use that, because we are worried it's going to leak data, or it's going to, the hallucinations are going to cause problems, all of which are legitimate concerns. But as soon as you say no, you risk shadow AI. And frankly, my guess is that almost any company today with more than a handful of people has some amount of shadow AI. But the way to deal with it is not to clamp down and find it and root it out. It's to find it and bring it into the light. Have the structure so that people can experiment with AI, these sandboxes. And our sandbox infrastructure, I think, is very similar to what you described, KK. The goal is to have that infrastructure be powerful enough, capable enough, so that people don't need to go and pursue AI in the shadow. They can do it in the light, and do it with the appropriate visibility and with the appropriate support structures. So I do think it's worth, for any of you who are at a company with more than a handful of people, look at the problem. Do you have shadow AI? You probably do. And what are you going to do about it? And my recommendation is, don't clamp down on it. Instead, find a way to bring it into the light, support AI innovation, but do it with structure.
Yeah, because those cases of shadow AI could also become interesting edge cases or use cases that you discover and bring into the company product line.
Right.
And in those cases, like, it's almost similar to a hackathon project, right? Where people are using it as their 20% project, and before you know it, this could be another edge computing component.
Exactly.
So speaking of data on-prem versus into the cloud, I think there's been a lot of debate over, the data moat of AI tooling. It's not just about the model development, but also, is the data secure? Is the data clean? So much of Akamai's work, Robert, is around edge computing. Can we dig into that and talk about what are some checks and balances you guys are creating for your clients for on-prem data security versus in the cloud data security, and when it comes to the types of safeguards, data privacy, feature sets you're building? You guys have been really innovating in this space for the past 10 years.
Well, yeah, it is true that anytime you're using AI, you are opening up a new attack surface. So as good as it does come with some downside. There's new ways of attacking these things, and we're going to see the attacks evolve dramatically over the next few years. 'Cause I think we're still in the early days, but already you start to see people attacking applications that use AI in novel ways. In some sense, it resembles social engineering, because these LLMs are basically socially engineerable. If you think about the guardrails that are built into these things, they're good, but guardrail is probably a weird or a wrong metaphor, because guardrail makes you think of steel and something hard. Guardrails built into LLMs are soft and they're squishy, and they can actually be socially engineered. So if you don't have some kind of structure in place that's going to protect your models, you're opening yourself up to a whole lot of vulnerabilities. That's another reason, by the way, to be doing your AI in the light, because that means that you can put the proper tooling in front of your AI applications that's going to provide some level of protection. And it is also true that, when you deploy AI in different locations, that can become a new challenge, because is your say you have an AI firewall or something like that, is your AI firewall there where you need it, where you're deploying your AI? That can be a challenge.
Especially with edge computing, they're all going to be in different devices.
Yeah, we've tried to take an approach of basically have that security stack be ubiquitous at the edge, everywhere. I've oftentimes said that when it comes to computation, it's better to move the computation to the data than the other way around. And that means that rather than basically backhauling your AI interactions to some central stack where you can protect it, instead make sure that security stack is at the edge where it can protect your data, your AI interactions. So yeah, it's yet another reason why I think you want to be bringing your AI use into the light. Avoid shadow AI, and just remember, these AI apps just have an enormous attack surface, and no matter what guardrails are advertised, they're squishy, they're hackable, and they're socially engineerable.
Yeah, speaking of kind of the social engineering aspect, I feel like KK, so much of Delta's, workforce is in that kind of interfacing with another human and being able to really understand what are your customer pain points and needs. How are you guys kind of educating not just the Delta kind of IT tech team, but also the front lines, like the people who are in the customer relations role, so that they don't fall for a lot of these socially engineered ploys?
And, that's a very important topic to talk about, only because, it used to be that phishing attacks where, you could actually easily figure out that, hey, this is a phishing attack because of the grammar or badly designed, whatever it is, right? And now it's very sophisticated because it's probably gone through an LLM and probably gramified or whatever. So the aspect of it is that we definitely provide many tools. I mean, in addition to the education, we provide many tools to our employees. And the important thing is to start from good data, because we as an enterprise, we have different sources of truth and so on and so forth. But even in spite of all that, there's a way in which you can figure out that, hey, we want to have consistent data, good data that goes into any of these platforms, and that's the starting point. In addition, even as some of these platforms provide outputs, that's where the guardrails come in. I mean, so this one end is about, hey, toxic language or incorrect language or any of those. And that's where the training helps with respect to our own, employees, that, people you're talking to on the phone, that, if they are actually using a tool which is based on an LLM, then there is a human in the loop typically. Right. And so they act as that other buffer in addition to all of those guardrails and correctness that you put in to ensure that that's the right way. So there's training, there's making sure that the guardrails are in place, but in addition, make sure that our interactions are curated to the largest extent possible, but not, it's a different aspect of not shadow IT itself, but it's sort of where you got to say, how do I, as a interaction point with a customer, how do I interact properly? So those are all curated, to a large extent. So
I mean, so much of 2025, the AI world is about agentic, solutions and having a voice agent answer customer pain points instead of talking to human in the loop. Like at a place like Delta, how do you make sure that as you guys are thinking about automation, you are creating safe environments to test out, say, an agent that may completely handle orchestration and workflow of a single customer service rep?
Yeah, and again, one of the recent announcements we made was about a agentic-based, concierge, Delta Concierge. That's what our CEO Ed Bastian announced at the Consumer Electronics Show in January. Now, obviously, that involves orchestrating between multiple functions, and the whole notion of agentic AI is right there. And so, what we are trying to do is be, from a functional perspective, be much more oriented towards take your personalized, information into account, see what insights we can provide to what we call a customer journey. Because we don't look at only the flight itself. We are saying, hey, you need to look at the entire journey, including from when you started booking the flight, or how do you get to the airport, what is your airport experience, and all of those things. And so we are what you would call a high tech but high touch company. And so that's where every employee who comes along the way, I mean, it's more about those situations where they are interacting with a customer are in the context of an app or a set of tools that we've actually curated and designed. And so that's one aspect of it. They are not actually going out there and saying, hey, okay, I'm going to use email and get phished right there. But at the same time, they are actually trained to make sure that they are using the right tools that we have provided from a company perspective, but also leveraging those tools to make that experience with the customer far better. And because that's the welcoming, I called it welcoming, caring, and elevated.
Right.
And that's really where we feel that we excel. And leveraging the AI is basically saying that how can I know more about the customer and interact with them in the way they prefer, right?
Right. So that's great, because Delta is an experience. It's not just one product, one interface, one person. It's really an end-to-end workflow.
Absolutely.
So shifting gears to more around the spicy topics of AI governance, policy, and regulation. How, as publicly traded companies like Akamai, like Delta, you guys also work in tandem with a lot of the policymakers and regulators of educating them, because so much of what's happening in this environment is the technology is changing at warp speed, and the regulators are oftentimes fast following what's happening. Would love your thoughts, Robert and KK, on like how you guys are thinking about working in alignment or in tandem with the policymakers, the regulators out there who are really looking to you two and people like, in your positions on educating them on what are the right areas for them to write policy and regulation in.
Yeah, regulation is not my area of expertise, and I'm, sort of loath to, push a strong view on what should be regulated and what shouldn't. But I do think there's some basic concepts that I think are fairly non-controversial and maybe helpful, which is simply that, any structure that's going to help with create confidence, because in a completely unregulated environment, you can end up in a situation where users and enterprises can't trust the technology that they're looking to potentially implement, and that can hold things back. If regulation is done right, potentially it raises confidence and raises the ability of a company or an individual to trust what they're using, and that can actually be a positive in terms of innovation. So it's not always clear to me that regulation is anti-innovation, right? They're always put at the opposite end. Oh, regulation means anti-innovation. Innovation is anti-regulation. It doesn't have to be that way if it's done in the right way. I think the right regulation can foster innovation. But that's kind of as far as I'm comfortable going when it comes to talking about regulation. It's just not my area.
No, all good. What about you, KK? Do you want to get a little?
Not my area either.
Hot takes
I'm not going to become more controversial than Bobby just was, but more about. We are obviously in a regulated environment ourselves, and
You're
so
working with the FDA.
Yeah, absolutely. The FAA, the TSA, all of those agencies are always wanting to come in and look for compliance. What are our critical systems? Where are our security practices and all of that?
I'm sure you're educating them.
Absolutely. That's part of where we have to work with them. Clearly, in some cases, as you mentioned, they're not all up to speed on what really is going on, right? The reality of it. So my peer, who's the CISO, is the Chief Information Security Officer. She's definitely part of some of those communities which actually interact actively with some of these agencies. And so the act of working with these agencies is also all about influencing them and saying that, hey, these are not exactly how these are in place, but this is where we should be realistic about what can be accomplished within a certain aspect of regulation. And so I think that this also, if you want to call it, there should be more of a convergence of some of the regulations also, because the EU goes one way, the US goes another way, and so that's not helpful for all of us, right? So, and one talks about, preventing some of these issues, and the other one says that how can we actually work in a decentralized manner and not prevent them, and so on and so forth. There's not convergence, and that's where we need to actually work with these regulatory agencies to make sure that, hey, there can be more of a consistent approach to it. But we also work with them to influence what exactly they should be looking at, what kind of regulation should there be. And in the same vein of what you started asking, right, are we stifling innovation in the name of regulation? That's something that both should coexist is really what it is, right?
So we've been pretty theoretical about a lot of this stuff, and I want to end on some tactical advice you would give to AI founders and practitioners. So lightning round, if you were to give one piece of advice for an AI founder or operator, what would that be for the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, my high-level advice would be focus on the problem you're trying to solve and then use the right tool. I think the hype around AI has almost flipped that equation, where so much of the conversation is about, well, how do I use ChatGPT to solve problem X? ChatGPT isn't always the right solution. Even AI isn't always the right solution. So look at the problem, use the right tools for the problem, and even if AI is the right solution, that doesn't mean it's, as I said, it's not necessarily an LLM. There's a whole world of AI and even machine learning, even deep learning, that's way beyond or way broader than LLM. Use the right tool for the problem and focus on the problem and solving it in the right way.
I was actually going to say the same thing in terms of, but I would expand it from a perspective of there's no such thing as a non-business problem. Mm-hmm. What is the business problem you're trying to solve? And, yes, we can do a lot of infrastructure and it can be as, infrastructure-y as ChatGPT. But the point is, in the end, what is the business problem? How does this help, solve some of the pain points along the way and result in outcomes that are going to be helpful for everybody, society, companies, and all of that. And that's where I would say start there, and then you can dive deeper into a particular vertical. And then typically it is the case that if you've gone deep enough within the vertical, you can actually come up and then it will laterally expand to other industries and areas as well. And so that'll be sustainable, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you both for such great food for thought. I think so much of what we've discussed is really breeding a culture of openness, curiosity, being able to test and iterate on new tools, but also seeing that there are some underlying principles to design thinking and starting at the why and understanding our problem statements first before jumping head in to retrofitting some type of AI solution. So thank you, Robert and KK, for the time, and would love to revisit this in a year from now and see if some of these best principles and practices play out in the AI startups that we support today. Great. Thank you.
Thank you both.